Today we are going to do a little bit of a tutorial walking you through a step by step on how to open a file as a transaction coordinator. Hello and welcome back. My name is Cecilia Peralta. I am a virtual assistant, and in this channel I share tips, tutorials, and industry insights to help virtual assistants become successful business owners. All right, so here I am in my computer. I'm going to be sharing the screen the whole time so we can review the document together. The document that I'm going to be using today is the ASIS residential contract. This is the Florida Realtors and Florida Bar approved contract that we use in the state of Florida. Clearly, if you are doing TC in a different state, you're going to be using a different type of contract. So I don't want you to focus so much on the contract itself, but I want you to understand the process and also understand that this is just an example to show what are the steps that I take when I open a file, when I start working on a new contract. And I'm going to kind of show you a couple of, I don't want to say shortcuts, but tricks that I use in this particular contract and what I am focusing on. So I'm going to be paying attention and looking for potential errors. I'm going to be making sure that I have all the due dates out of the contract. And I'm going to also be making sure that the contract is executed. Okay, so here on the first page, the first thing that you're going to, check is the name of the parties. We have the seller's and the buyer's name. It is a good practice always to check in public record for the name of the seller. Now, moving on, the other thing that I check is the address, making sure that it is correct. And again, you're going to be checking in public records to make sure that the name matches the address, matches the property tax ID, and the legal description. Now, how do you check on public records? Well, you can go to the property appraiser, or if you have access to the MLS, normally they offer IMAP, which is, a service, a website where you can check these type of things. All right, so here we are going to see in this paragraph that personal property items that are included in this sale are the dishwasher, the microwave, the range, and the refrigerator. At least put a note and make sure that you have that information handy. When you book the inspection, sometimes the inspectors are going to ask you because the washer and dryer, for example, are not always included. And if they're not included, they don't have to check it. They don't have to make sure these appliances work. So just a little tip in there. Now, on the next section, we are going to see the financials. In this case, the price is $500,000. Then the next line is going to be the amount that they are going to put on escrow. Okay, the escrow deposit. And moving on, you're going to have here a space for the financing, which could be at least in this contract expressed as as a percentage or as an amount. And that is going to be the loan amount, okay? And the balance at closing will be $90,000. Now, sometimes the math doesn't add up. And, if it's an error, you will have to, make sure that at least you bring it to the attention of your client, which could be the buyer's agent or the seller's agent, and make corrections upon approval of the agent, right? So the next thing, super important that we need to take in consideration is the acceptance day. And in this case, what I do is I make sure that the acceptance day actually matches the day that the contract was executed. And the next thing that obviously is super important is the closing date, right? That is going to be one of your due dates, obviously, one of the most important. And as you can see here, there was a change. Now we're going to come back to this particular change and we're going to review it just in a moment. But first, we're going to finish reviewing all the information that you could potentially find in this particular contract. So the next important thing that I'm going to check is the assignability. This contract allows the parties to assign the contract as long as they selected the right option. In this case, they selected that the contract may not be assigned. So in the case that the buyer brings an assignment agreement, that is not going to be valid. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the financing part. So as you can see here, they are going to be using a conventional loan. Not all of the loans are exactly the same, and you might need specific documentation for FHA and VA, so you need to be aware of what type of loan they are using. So in this case, another super important thing is to understand how many days we have for the loan approval period here in lines 89 and 90. Because they left it blank, you will have 30 days, or the buyer actually will have 30 days to get the loan approval. Now, you are going to make sure that here it says buyer shall make application for financing within, in this case, 5 days after the effective date. Now, the majority of the contracts that I receive are already coming with a pre-approval letter, meaning that the buyers already complete an application. This is why they were able to get a pre-approval letter. I also wanted to show you, in the case that you didn't know, we do have every line numbered, which makes it easier to identify, parts of the contract. Not just that, but if you see here right next to the numbers an asterisk, that means that in that line there is something that could potentially be changed or selected. And I'm going to show you an example later on how useful that could be, because in this contract, for example, we have towards the end a lot of pages that you have no space to fill in the blanks. So that there is no information that you are going to get out of these pages. So we keep going, and the next due date is going to be the title, evidence, and insurance. And in this case, they leave it blank, so at least it has to be completed 15 days prior to closing. Okay, so that is something else that we're going to add to our task management system to calculate the dates. Now, moving on to the next page, parties selected that the seller shall designate the closing agent and pay for the owner's policy. When you receive the preliminary alta from the title company right before closing, you could make sure that the owner's policy is being charged to the right party based on the instructions that you have here. Now, the next thing that I review is the home warranty. In this case, it says non-applicable. So none of the parties agreed to pay for the home warranty. However, in the case they did, I need to make sure that I put a note in my task management system and I create a task, because I will have to be the one who coordinates the home warranty. That invoice is going to be part of the closing cost. So in order to have that information, you will have to contact the home warranty company and coordinate everything prior to closing. The next thing that we see here in line 194, and it says that the seller shall pay installments prior to closing, and buyer shall pay the installments due after closing. Again, that is something that is important to know, because the title company will have to create the preliminary alta based on those instructions as well. Okay, so for the next page, the first one is for the flood insurance program, okay? And it gives 20 days to the buyer to terminate this contract in the case that for whatever reason they cannot get flood insurance. So that is another due date that you will have to take note so you don't forget. So the next thing here in line 261 is going to be the inspection, okay? The proper inspection and right to cancel. In this case, the parties agree to have 7 days as the inspection period. And you will have to make sure that the buyer already booked inspection within this time period, and not just book and complete inspection, but also finish the negotiations for any type of repairs or credits that they are going to be requesting. So we go to the next page, and as you can see, if you observe, the numbers on the left, there is no asterisk. So it means that in this page, there is nothing here that either the buyer or the seller were able to select. So it's nothing really that you're going to get out of this page that you could use to fill up the information in your task management system. So this is why I was mentioning before that, if you pay attention to the asterisks, you will know super fast what are the pages that you absolutely need to pay attention and what are the pages that there is no information for you. So next one is kind of the same thing. You see no asterisks at all. Okay, if we keep going, same thing with page 8. And then page 9, same thing. Page 10, no asterisks. So as you can see, those pages are, going pretty fast. Now, when it comes to the page number 11, at the bottom of this page, you're going to have the additional addenda, and that includes any type of riders for disclosures and things like that. Like, for example, the HOA disclosure, or if it's a short sale, or many other riders that could be included as part of the contract. So as you can see here, there is no additional addenda that the parties have included as part of the contract. Now, I also going to keep an eye, because let's say that I realize that this property is actually in a homeowners association community. Then, clearly we're going to need an HOA disclosure. So moving on, there is no additional terms. And on the last page, what I'm going to be checking is that we have the names of the buyer's agent, listing agent, and the brokerage. I also check that we have the address for the buyer and the seller, and that the contract is signed. So once that I review everything, and normally I kind of do all together, right? I'm going to check page by page, and I'm going to be looking for due dates, and I'm also going to be looking for signatures. But just for the sake of this example, now that I finished taking a look at the date, I'm going to kind of pay attention and make sure that there are no missing signatures. And in this case, okay, so we have both the buyer and the seller's signatures. Keep moving up, and I see that we have the buyer's initial and the seller's initial, as it is required here in this page. And I keep doing the same thing with every single page.
So page 10, we are good. Page 9, we are good. Page 8, we are good. 7, same thing. 6, nice.
5, we have a problem. As you can see here, we do have the seller's initial, but we don't have the buyer's initials. So that really is a problem. Why? We are missing an initial. So this is not fully executed. So we keep going.
Number 4 is good. Number 3 is good. Number 2 is good. Number 1 is good.
But I don't know if you remember a little bit earlier that I mentioned that I'm going to come back to discuss this particular issue, because as you can see here, we have a change in the contract. It looks like originally it was April 30th, 2024, the closing date, but I'm assuming that the seller, changed it to, in this case, February 17, 2024, which, if I take a look at that, to me, it looks like a typo, because, the contract was signed on March, so it's not possible to close before that. And I see that there is only one initial, which is the seller's initial, and we're missing the buyer's initial. So in this case, this change is actually not valid until the buyer put his initial in here. So if it will be just the page 5 that is missing an initial, I would just go ahead and send it to the buyer, for him to sign. But because there is a change now on the closing date, I need to make sure that the buyer's agent is absolutely aware and all the parties approve that before I send it to the buyer. All right, so we are going to make all the necessary corrections. And once that everyone signed on the corrections, we finally will have an executed contract. And at that time, we are going to start putting all the information in the task management system. So hopefully the task management system that you use is going to help you calculate the dates instead of you counting one by one or, checking on a calendar. And once that we do that, we are going to start sending the intro emails. The task management system that I use is open to close. So let me know in the comments if you would like me to create a tutorial on how to get all these due dates into open to close. So open to close can calculate the dates for you, and you can have all that information handy to send, for example, the intro emails. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.